Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV.
Woo.
Let's go.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Kids in the Room podcast. Today, we've got Eran Thomson on the show. Eran, so, welcome to the show. Tell us who you are. Tell us what your specialty is. Tell us, who are you? Yeah.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Yeah, so I'm Eran Thomson, and I'm a writer, director, creative director, and I'm currently based in Sydney, Australia, but you can tell by my accent that it's not my place of birth. I moved here from New York City almost 19 years ago, and that's I've been here ever since. Came for a 3-month holiday and never left.
Wow, 3-month holiday and never left. You said you were a screenwriter?
Yeah, I've done some screenwriting. So I'm a writer. I'm working on a book right now. I started my whole professional career as an advertising copywriter and then creative director. And then from there, sort of started developing content and web series and have written feature films. And right now I'm kind of back in the world in advertising a little bit to keep the mortgage paid while I pursue some other creative projects and work on some writing projects as well.
Wow. Feature films. What feature films?
Feature films is just like regular movies, right? As opposed to like a short film.
Oh, no. I mean, like, which feature films? Are there any that I might know that might resonate with me immediately or the audience?
No, I mean, none of them, none of the features I've written have been made, which is a pretty sad and common story in Hollywood. The amount of scripts that get generated versus the amount of scripts that get produced the ratio is very high to very low. But they're a lot of fun to work on, and, I get to meet and work with great directors and other writers. And, for me, the most fun part is kind of cracking the story and coming with the idea, then cracking the story. And that's been really fun. But no feature films made yet. No
features yet. All right, cool. Well, they'll be coming, I'm sure. So you've been a screenwriter. You said you also I think we talked offline, and you mentioned like also you are an author too as well. You write books.
Yeah, I'm working on a book right now, actually. It's called A Life-Threatening Situation, and it's about all the times I've almost died in my life. About two years ago now, there's a big international comedy festival here in Australia called the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. It's probably the one comedy festival that attracts global artists. It's a pretty big a deal. And I got invited to do a show there, and I hadn't really performed stand-up. I'd been in comedic writing situations, but I wasn't a stand-up comedian by any means. I wasn't a performer, really. But I had this idea to tell some funny stories about all the times, or some of the times I've almost died, and I thought that could be an interesting show. And so what I did is I put together this presentation-style talk where I extrapolated shonky data and bogus takeaways from my stories and try to help educate people around like periods in their life when they might want to be more careful and the types of things they might want to be more careful about. And I did this show at MCI at the comedy festival. It was really, really fun. It was really, really successful. And one of the things that happened after the show was people came up to me and they're like, "Man, do you remember that time when we went whitewater rafting and we almost died?" And I was like, "Oh, I forgot about that." And someone else would come up to me like, "Remember that time in Mexico and the guys came at us with the guns and we almost died?" I was like, "Oh, I forgot about that." And just all these stories started coming out of the woodwork. And I was like, this is too many stories now for a show. What could I do with this? And so that's the book I'm on now, is putting those stories together sort of as a series of comedic essays or humorous essays.
Yeah, that's definitely rad. Tell us about the story about in Mexico, about the guns, the guys. I want to hear about that. We want to hear about that. Let's go.
You want to hear one?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's hear about it.
I'll tell you when there's a similar story, which I think is better. And this took place in Brazil. So it was actually the very beginning of the around the world trip that landed me here in Australia. And I started my trip in Brazil. And I flew down to Rio, and I was there for about a week by myself. And then a buddy from New York was going to come down and hang out with me for a week. And then he was going to go back to New York, and I was going to continue my trip. And his name was Tim, and Tim came down and met me in Rio, and we were having a great time in Rio, and we went to one of these kind of beautiful outdoor bars in like the center, in a center of a big plaza, and we were early, right? We've been out kind of exploring all day, and we decided to sit down and have a cold beer. And very slowly, this huge crowd kind of built up around us, and this whole plaza became like an outdoor bar situation. And so we're sitting there, and a local guy comes up to us, and he's like, "Hey, where are you guys from?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm from New York." And my friend Tim, he's from Sydney. He was living in New York, and he's like, "I'm from Australia." And he's like, "Oh, wow, that's cool. Do you guys mind if I hang out with you a little bit? I'm really interested to kind of practice my English, and I'd be glad, we can just hang out and get to know each other a little bit, and maybe I can give you some pointers about Rio in exchange." And we're like, "Sure, great." So he sits down with us, and we having a few drinks, and every time it's time to go buy another round of drinks, he says, "Oh, don't worry about it. I got you. You guys are doing me a favor, helping me with, improve my English. Don't worry about it." And he would go up to the he would take our money, but he would go get the drinks for us, because it was really crowded by this point, and he knew all the people to like get through the crowd and get to the bar quickly and get us beers fast. So we're doing this all night long, having a great time talking to him. And then finally at the end of the night, he's like, "Well, hey, look, it's been really great chatting with you. Have a great time the rest of your travels here in Brazil," and says goodbye and leaves. And then we stand up to leave, and as soon as we do, the head manager of the bar comes over and like hands us a bill. And I immediately clock that this guy has been taking our money, pocketing it, running a tab at the bar, and now he's split with all the money that we gave him to buy beers all night long. My friend Tim, and I'm laughing. I'm like, we got scammed. And my friend Tim is irate. He's just like, "It's the principle of the thing. It's not cool." And he's basically refusing to pay the bill because he feels like we've already paid it to this guy who took off with our money. And
Right.
And I'm like, "Man, it's like the equivalent of like $20 US. It's not a big deal. Getting scammed is part of travel. It happens." But Tim's irate. He's getting more and more upset about the fact that he's been taken advantage of. And the next thing that happens is these two guys in military fatigues with M16 machine guns come over to us, and they're like, "Are you going to pay the bill or what?" And I'm like, yeah, we're going to pay the bill. And I give the manager the money. And as soon as the manager the money that we owe him, these two guys with machine guns are like, "Hey, do you mind if we sit down with you for a little while? We'd love to practice our English." We're just like, "What? No way, man. It's not happening." And anyway, to make a long story short, we got this amazing photograph with these guys that we ended up staying and having a couple more beers with, and learning about their story and what it meant to be in the military. And there's this photograph of Tim in this crowded crowd with a guy holding the M16 up to his head, which is just, Wild West photo. But he's got these two guys holding M16 machine guns to his head while he's like doing this. He's got his hands up. So we got out of that one all right.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Where were you guys at? Like in a regular neighborhood in Rio, or were you like near the favelas, or?
No, we were, it was right in the heart of Rio. And what was really scary was that the day before that, that was the day that Tim came down. The day before that, I had been down near the water, and I'd been exploring, and I kind of went off the tourist map. And I found myself in a part of town that was really quiet. There wasn't much happening there. And I decided to just kind of like lay in the sun in a park for a while. And I was laying back on the edge of a fountain, kind of just dozing off, catching some rays. And I hear like this shouting and screaming. And I'm like, "What is going on?" And I turn and look, and I see a guy running towards me, being chased by another guy. And both of them in just normal street clothes. And the guy chasing the first guy, pulls out a gun and shoots him. And there's only three of us in the street. And he looks at me and he goes, "Policia," and like grabs the dude he's just shot and like drags him away. And I was like, what the hell? So this happened. And then the next day we're dealing with these two cats with M16. So I was like, there's a lot of guns in Rio.
Wait,
I'm not,
what?
not yeah.
What? You shot? There was a guy who just shot somebody in front of you guys, and then he thought you guys were the police, and then he basically just dragged you away,
No.
dragged the guy he shot away, right?
Correct. Yeah. He was explaining to me that he was police. Although he was a guy in jeans and a t-shirt, for all I know, he could have been anyone.
Wow.
But yeah, that happened right in front of me, and it was very, very weird, because it's just always weird to see someone get shot.
Yeah.
How often you've had that experience.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's bananas. That's.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've seen someone get shot like that?
I mean, I can't incriminate myself, but I think, as a kid, I think I've seen some stuff, I've seen like
Where did you grow up?
bikers, do some stuff, Yeah.
Right. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in the United States in Connecticut. Yeah. And then I lived somewhat, in the Southeast for a little while, then, Miami. And then I've also lived like, LA, and now Silicon Valley. Yeah.
Oh, right on. What, so you grew up, what part of Connecticut did you grow up in?
Stamford, Connecticut.
No way. That's where my grandparents lived.
Yeah. No way.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. 86 Eden Road was where they lived. And, I mean, it's been a few years. My grandfather's a pretty famous horticulturist. He invented like a few species of rhododendrons and I think irises. He was what he was famous for. And in Stamford, Connecticut, he had this massive public gardens that he created that were full of all the flowers that he invented and other ones as well. And it became like a destination for flower nerds, from all over the world.
Wait, so he invented flowers? Like, how do you invent a flower? Like, what are you like doing some like, genetic hybriding of like, how does that work? Yeah. Tell us.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. But the way that I recall, I was very young when I learned this, and I'm not sure that I even fully understand what he was doing. But at a basic level, what I saw him doing was he would take two different types of flowers and then get the word for it, but basically where you cut the stems in a way that of two different flowers so that they fit together and then they grow together. And then that creates a hybrid or a new version of a flower that wouldn't exist. It's sort of like,
that's crazy.
You might have seen people that have like taken an apple tree and cross-pollinated it with a pear and then made like a pear-shaped apple or something like that.
I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could almost like genetically hybrid or cause these plants to kind of like, I don't know, have like a baby together by, cutting their stems together and kind of taping them or fusing them together in some way. That's crazy.
It's pretty incredible. Yeah. There's somewhere I remember seeing like someone had taken a tree and they had figured out they've spliced all these different fruits onto one tree. So a single tree was growing apples and pears and other stone fruit, that were all growing off this basic one tree. So at a small level, my grandfather was.
That's bananas, man. I've never.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then you said you lived down south in the Southeast for a while. Where were you then?
Oh wow, man! I've lived in Florida, Miami, Orlando. I've lived in also North Carolina. I've lived in South Carolina. I've lived, L.A. North now Silicon Valley. So yeah.
Right. How come you moved around so much?
Oh man, I'm just an explorer. I'm just a nomad.
Is that right? You were just curious?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have different family, at different places, and at a period of time, my father passed away, and so my mom remarried and moved away, and I went to these other areas where I had family during that time, and then L.A. was more of my own thing, the whole L.A. thing, that was me, and then Silicon Valley, just me. Yeah.
Right. And what Did you move to LA with an intention or a
Of
dream
course.
or something you're
Yeah,
chasing?
of course, man. Who doesn't move to LA without intentions? So I moved to LA with the intentions of, or not even intentions of what I did. It was building a social platform for creative people, and yeah, that's what I did. And yeah, it was called
What was
Move.
that called?
It was called movefaces.com. And then
Oh, right.
we did it as Move Faces TV. We had Move Faces events. We did large red carpets in Hollywood with celebrities. We would, help different artists try to get signed and, casting directors. We do things with MTV. We do partnerships with them. We were fused in. We had numerous celebrities that we worked with consistently, Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds really cool. And are you still involved with that, or is that you moved on to something different?
Great question. Great question. Yeah. So what I've kind of do is I actually paused, man. I literally moved, after, we started building the brand. About 4 years later, we decided to just go separate ways. There was a point where we wanted to raise capital, but a lot of the people who understood what we were doing in the industry, they weren't really supportive of it. Yeah. They weren't supportive of it because it was like something that it would destroy a lot of the business models that currently exists in Hollywood. Hollywood is this old system. It's this old buddy, network, and every kind of, you've got the feature film companies that run everything, and they kind of lock things and work together tightly. They don't really like, new technologies and people coming in and shifting things. And if they were a little bit afraid of things because you had like the Sean Parker guy who screwed up the music industry. And then, any new technology who wants to come in there is a little bit iffy. And then they had also the iPod, with Steve Jobs. And, once Steve Jobs moved in with the iPod, he actually controlled a large portion of the music industry, right? That's what we do now, right?
Yeah.
We talk about streaming and downloading. So these things were taken over or disrupted by people in tech. So they're really funny about letting techie people involved into the industry.
And what specifically were you or they thinking you were going to disrupt?
Well, number one, we were just going to, allow people to, or what we started doing is we started letting people connect based off of their profession, and then provide them with the tools to be able to, express that or showcase that. Think creative LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's what I was imagining. Yeah, I just Googled Move Faces. I couldn't find it. Is it still around?
Oh no, we shelved the product. We shelved the product, and I started focusing, mostly on Move Faces TV, and then I moved to Silicon Valley. Started working with a bunch of other tech companies up here, like Lyft and a bunch of cool stuff like that, and and Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it, LinkedIn, and I went to these companies and started building things for them, and then I realized, even LinkedIn, who I thought at the time, had everything figured out, even Facebook, they really just didn't. They're still, looking for outside ideas, and they still haven't figured out everything 100%, which is why they just acquire companies to kind of, hit that status quo. But overall, that's what I pretty much discovered on the journey, is that nobody really had it figured out, but you think everybody did. They just had more money. Yeah.
So are you a developer? Is that?
I think I started off developing, right? And then I switched into design, right? So I guess you can call me a product guy, right? I'm a product guy.
Yeah.
I envision things, and I do things, and I make things. And this podcast is actually just like a hybrid of Move Faces TV. It's just a podcast. So yeah, I still do, push the name and use the name, but not as frequently as I did. But once I launched back the podcast, that's when I started using it more again, just with the podcast. Gotcha. Yeah.
And when you were doing when you're going around trying to raise money, what were you trying to raise money for? To build it or to hype it, or both?
So, you need both, right? You need, but I think most of it was really just to hype things more, right? Because when you've got Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn who, when he started pushing out LinkedIn to the masses, he already had one startup under his belt that was successful, which was PayPal. Okay. So his Rolodex increase by the 16th power, right? Or maybe the 50th power.
Yeah.
Before that, he was just another guy who was, creating the first social network at the time, right? Which I think he called Social Net.
Yeah.
And he created it, but, from the way the story kind of goes is Peter Thiel came to him and said, hey, wait, don't do that right now. This is not the right time. Wait till after I've got this thing called PayPal, wait till after, join him, help me with this. Let me get this thing off the ground. Then actually go ahead and, push this social networking idea. And that's when he after, PayPal became successful, all the PayPal founders, Elon Musk, Max Lessivin, all those guys all went their separate ways and, became, powerhouses into the tech industry of today, right? I mean, Tesla is an exact offspring of PayPal.
Yeah.
But they had to get those large wins at the beginning, right? And that allowed them to have the network and an influence to be able to permeate that success, right? But prior to that, they wouldn't have been able to execute the things that they wanted to do. They didn't have the buy-in. They didn't have the power to do so. They needed one solid, successful win that was easier for them to actually join up and get into and then execute that. And then everybody was, rich off of that. And then they had power and influence in the industry. And then what they did is did their own separate thing, right? Peter Thiel invested into Facebook, numerous other companies that you can probably sit there and use daily on your mobile application. He invested into them, and so did Reid Hoffman. So this is kind of how the network actually worked. But at the time, for us, we needed the resources and the advertisement. And since we were focusing mostly on the, I guess you would say, the entertainment industry, you needed a lot of advertisement, right?
Yeah.
Because of the way the industry works, it's just how Hollywood is. But when you talk about Silicon Valley, you can leverage different things because it works differently. But overall, that's what you pretty much need. Yeah. So both. Yeah.
And was there a revenue model behind that idea, or was it? Yeah.
Yeah, of course, definitely was a revenue model.
Yeah.
The revenue model made total sense. I mean, we met with, Vince Phillips, a bunch of other people like that. Like that, these guys were, big lawyers, for artists like Little John and, different investors in tech up here in Silicon Valley. We met with people in LA. We met with people who were running, who were previous investors in MySpace and things like that. So we met and talked to the right people. It's just a lot of the people were a little bit afraid because, at the point in time, we didn't have the, I guess the voice. Right? The voice behind the madness. Like, it's cool we had all this crazy stuff, but it's like, all right, but who are you guys? It's different. Right. You got to get that first win in.
Yeah. Do you think so if you were to do it differently now, what would you done? Like, what do you think the major takeaway from that experience was for you? And if you were going to move forward with a new idea, what would you bring with you?
That's a great question. I thought about it a little bit, but not too much. But I can tell you, some. I can tell you some highlights. Right? There's always so many new things that I can always create and envision. So I just haven't thought about it so much. But I have thought about it a little bit. But I can basically kind of backtrack it to things where I see haven't been fixed or solved, or some issues that we saw building the actual platform itself. One, what I would say is you need to focus on one thing and do it well. We were doing 4 different solid, big billion-dollar business things out of the company, right? But at the same time, with too small of a team and a very small budget, it was amazing that we did the things that we did, given the budget and the experience that we had at that time. We made a lot of successes. We made those partnerships with MTV, and numerous of companies, and with all the celebrities, doing Jamie Foxx's birthday party with Movefaces TV, requesting it, A-listers, Paris Hilton, you name it, they were doing it, so it began to be like a little trend. I mean, I created this whole thing, Movefaces events, where I would get everybody on Hollywood and Violin just looking to say, hey, what the hell is going on over there? There's a red carpet in the Valley. Who the fuck is that? All the top promoters and everybody else would come over, hey man, you guys want to join in? I was like, nah, we're not promoters, dude. How the fuck did you guys get people in the Valley? So it was just a lot of hacking things, man, as we were building, and we had to be creative, very creative. And if I can go back and change anything, I would automatically say is I would downsize and only focus on one thing. And not even just like, when I say one thing, not even just like one thing that the company itself was going to explore and do, but morally one thing. Even, I mean, when you look inside, maybe, for example, let's say if you're an actor, you know, and an actor most likely will need maybe what? Maybe an actor mostly needs someone to be a casting director. So maybe I would have started off with only those two. You know, just throwing out an example. Or photographer typically would need a model. Maybe I would have started off with only those two and doubled down on that.
Oh, like trying to be the connection point.
And provide all those tools online that would allow them to do so. There's a lot of strong things that you have to really kind of understand when you're building something like this. I think there were some things like Model Mayhem and some other little sites that, or Craigslist, you know, had like its job sections and things like that. But none of them were like what we were building at the time. Nothing close to it. And so what we were doing, we were thinking, I already had plans at the time to, you know, do things where we had people on the platform. We would actually distribute and put their movies out. We were working on distribution deals with Universal and numerous of companies. So what we were going to do is, if you had a feature film, I would let the network actually, you know, vote on it. And then we'd get some, you know, funding or put something behind it and then push it out. And then we would distribute it right on the website itself. So a lot of the technology that we were pushing out and building, it really wasn't around at the time. So we got dragged in by the CTO of Warner Brother Music. He wanted to know what the hell we were doing. And Warner Brother Music and also Pictures, they wanted to know what we were doing. And there was basically a funnel we also wanted to drag into as well that would allow you to be able to purchase and download videos. Movies, right? Directly within the site and things like that, and allow people who are users of the site to be able to distribute them through that. So we had this whole crazy thing that we were doing. And so when we price pointed with them, they told us how much it would be monthly. And then there's these international things where if you release certain things during certain regions, there's another thing you have to buy. So it's a bunch of crazy stuff that you had to go ahead and pay for. So we were way past, I think, our scale of what we were trying to do. And we were stepping on foots. Right. We were stepping on foots with, not Vimeo. What was that? There was Vivo. I think that's what it was.
Vivo, the music videos?
Yeah, through YouTube. Yeah. So we were stepping foots on that guy's, the CEO's shoulders. You know, he sent a couple of cease and desist, and he was, you know, arguing with us about some stuff, saying he was a lawyer. And
man, it sounds like, you know, from a technological point of view and a hustle point of view, you are well ahead of the game, and you forged some very interesting relationships with not only, you know, celebrities and entertainment brands. Did you ever try and get any of them involved? You know, like, you know, hey, you like what we're doing. You're curious about it. Warner, you know, you got Warner Music and Warner Studios ringing you up. Like, why wouldn't there have been like an investment opportunity or an acquisition opportunity there that would have really helped you guys blow it up?
Great question. I think there were a couple. You know, I think like but you have to understand what we're building, right? We're building a platform, so who you got involved mattered. And what I mean by that,
you're no longer agnostic if Warner invests. Right?
And then you want people to take you serious as a technology company. So you can't get, you know, Young Jock or Little John, for example, on the as the ambassador, right? Because then it gets pushed down to this market, and then it's not like thought as mainstream. Then it becomes a gimmick. And not to say that these guys are not awesome people to have behind you and back you, because they're really great. I think we did a couple of sponsorships with Crunk Energy Juice at one time, so thankful for that. But I'm just saying, like, people typecast things into markets, and it could kind of suffocate the trajectory of where we wanted to go. So we had to think strategically who we would partner with. And then there were other celebrities that were really big, you know, that were A-listers, you know, that we, you know, that you know, were interested in, you know, bringing things to the table, but they didn't really understand how startups and investment worked. So a lot of them in Hollywood would come up with this ridiculous, you know, they didn't understand things to scale to a technology company in billions. They thought mom and pop shop, you know, hey, I'm such and such, you know, my name is big. I'm just going to bring you guys tons of views and tons of users because of my name. So I need 50%. Well, well, that doesn't fucking work good because you know what? 50% of a company that's trying to be $1 billion company right now, if I gave you 50%, that, you know, at where the directory we're going, you know, hey, that could put you in a point to where you've got like $30 billion or something like that, possibly. I mean, I mean, in order to get funding like we needed to be at least a 10x company, or at least somewhere in at least $1 billion in valuation easily. And, you know, that was really plausible what we were doing at the time. But the problem is like a lot of people in the entertainment industry just didn't get it. And it was just and everybody's just so gimmicky. Everybody in Hollywood is very gimmicky.
You can't have a celebrity sitting on your cap table with 50%, you know, like just because they're famous.
Yeah,
you know, there's more
but
value
you know they don't understand that, and they didn't understand that then, and so that's the entertainment industry understanding technology, and how the investment works, and that you really only get like maybe 0.5% or 1% if you're lucky, right? But that 1%, you know, comes down the road that ends up being, you know, maybe $500 million somewhat, you know, in the future, depending on how the trajectory of the company does. You know, but they didn't really see that. You know, they didn't understand all that.
This?
Wow. We were doing this in 2012. We were still looking for funding in 2012. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would imagine that the market has become more educated and slightly more sophisticated since then, you know.
Oh, totally.
There's this amazing TED, I think it's a TED talk, and the guy, I'm going to forget the guy's name, but he's a man who has been involved with a lot of successful startups. And he basically, he gives an entire TED talk, and he talks about all the different elements that make a startup work. You know, and yes, founder team is important. Yes, funding is important. Yes, product is more important. Yes, marketing is important. All those things. But he said that if you look at the spectrum of ideas that were put out into the world that had great founder teams, that were well funded, backed by solid VC with a solid reputable boards that were able to open doors and try and make things happen, give things the best shot of success that they ever possibly could have had. And then you extrapolate, like, why did these ones work and these ones not work? And he said the single biggest determinant is timing. In every single instance, you know, YouTube wasn't the first, right? The classic story. I mean, there's so many stories, but it's basically, you know, the right product, right team at the right time, and you never really know for sure if that's you until you don't.
Yeah, I mean,
it sounds like, you know. Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you 100%, Aaron. I think after, you know, even just me reflecting on it, I think we realized, you know, I mean, when we first started, you know, putting the idea together and shopping it and even talking to different companies and looking about the technology before we even understood the technology didn't exist. You know, everybody was like, well, how are you going to, well, we can't do that now. I mean, maybe in like 4 years or 2 years, you know, but that's like, where'd you get this idea from? I'm like, bro, I had a dream. Oh, what? Yeah, I literally had a dream. And then I started putting shit together, like literally. And that's really what happened. But a lot of the stuff at the time didn't exist. And it still doesn't exist, to be honest with you. But some of the things I've seen coming to fruition, but in smaller parts in different companies now. For example, Netflix, right. Facebook, they've pushed some of these features that, you know, we were already pushing out and experimenting with then. But now they're pushing them out in smaller pieces with separate companies.
Interesting.
And so we've seen those all become, you know, billion-dollar industries. Like the thing about, you know, pushing out our own movies and having our own production in-house, because we were the platform and the network to do it all in once, and we had the connections and everything else to do it. That didn't exist at the time, but now Netflix is starting to do it. You know, YouTube wants to do it. These things didn't happen at that period of time. There was no technology, you know, software bridge pushing out entertainment media at the time and having their own network and their own, you know, type of motion picture company internally. And then also distributing what others were doing too as well. But it still doesn't exist like in the way that we were doing it and the way we envision it by any means. But it's just, we see the parts just separated in different companies, just sprinkled all around. So we're seeing some of the things that we talked about then slowly start to come into fruition through different companies. And that's really always interesting for all of us to watch. My other co-founder, he ended up going to Harvard and he became a professor now. And, you know, he always would hit me up and talk about it. He's like, man, that stuff is just crazy. Like I'm seeing stuff all the time of the stuff we were doing, man. And like, that was it was way ahead of where we were. And, you know, it's crazy.
It's validating. It's like validating, like, see, we were right. We had a great idea. We were building something awesome. And it's frustrating because you're like, you know.
Yeah, it is that never, I think all creatives have it. But I think like in general, where I am and you know, and what I think about it is like, I think like, yeah, that sucks, but yeah, it doesn't. Because it's like, you kind of saw stuff and you kind of know. Like even when I'm going into different things, like when I'm going into places like LinkedIn and I'm learning and I'm building stuff for them, I'm like, hey man, they still haven't figured this shit out.
Yeah.
They didn't figure this out either.
I mean, just because you've been around for a while or have a, you know, like great board, great relationships, tons of money. Like the thing that just popped into my head was Quibi. You know, like
oh God,
that couldn't have been more set up for success, like on paper, right?
I met a couple of their founders at South by South. We were doing, we had Moo Faces there. We had a cow with a, you know, t-shirt on, running around there dancing and stuff like that. I mean, that was the South by South times, you know, and that was just it was hilarious because I remember I actually have a video of them selling their product and talking about it, and they were on Moo Faces TV, Quibi, yeah, for sure. I mean, they gave me their business cards and everything else. I saw a lot of things come into fruition. Saw a lot of people who, you know, started from the bottom, but now they're here. like literally. I think that's been my life. Started from the bottom, now we're here. I've seen it so much. Like I remember when I first, you know, when we were hacking up things and building the Moo Faces at the same time. I remember there was like, you know, this famous, well, not at the time, he wasn't a famous rapper. It was Tyga. He was in, you know, hanging out in malls. And he wasn't famous at all. And he just kind of was thinking he was famous. And he would just wear these, you know, rapper-like clothes and walk through the mall with like guys that you didn't think were cool, you know? But he believed that he was a rapper. And like, I remember some of my buddies, you know, we were like super young there. And he was like, yeah, that's that guy. He thinks he's a rapper. And I was like, oh, who is he? They're like, I don't know. He's like a little underground rapper. He does like some tapes around here in this area. His name's Tiger or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And he blew up. Same thing with Logic. Yeah. I met Logic literally when I moved to Silicon Valley. I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to build a startup here. What am I going to do? Okay, I'm burning money every day. Let me just get a part-time job. So I got literally a part-time job to keep myself busy. And then one day Logic walks in. And he's like, hey, do you know me? And I was like, no. He's like, no, one day you're going to know me. You're going to know me. Everybody's going to know me. I was like, oh, really? That's cool, man. No worries, dude. You know, that's awesome. And then, he's like, yeah, add me on Instagram. My name's Logic. And he had a little solid following, but nobody knew who the heck he was really. If I asked around, nobody knew who he was. But, you know, he eventually made it there.
It's interesting, like, you know, listening to you talk, because like if it feels like, you know, the old way people built fame was slowly over time, you know, like, I'm going to release another album. I'm going to do another tour. I'm going to, you know, do another PR interview run, like whatever it is. Like people built their celebrity and built their fame and recognition slowly over time. You're going to know me someday, right? Like Logic telling you. And then now it feels like if it's not instant, people are just confused. You know, like if I feel like the stories that we hear are like, she was a waitress until TikTok, you know, discovered, you know, she got 1 billion views on TikTok and now she's writing for Saturday Night Live, you know, like, or whatever, you know, like, it's just, I feel like the people's expectation around how to reap the rewards of fame and celebrity or talent even are warped by this new media landscape we live in.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. You know, I get it. Yeah. I mean, I would like to say, like, I agree with you 100%. But I think also a lot of these things, you know, there's still a lot of people who have been working and working on their craft for a long time. Like some of my, there was one girl, and a couple of people I knew who, they all started out doing the Vine thing, and they were actually
7 seconds, right?
Yeah, but but before 7 seconds, they were actually on Move Faces TV hosting my red carpets.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of the top ones who've got like 6 million, 5 million followers, and now they're influencers, and that's their lives. They start off on my red carpet, and Hollywood, North Hollywood, doing events on Lancaster and Magnolia, and La Brea, and all that stuff like that. I mean, they start off there. I mean, I was literally casting people off of Craigslist, and I would go through people who I thought could have potential, and I would train them how to talk on the red carpet and give them my pitch. And it's funny, like that was like their first strong time actually consistently being on the camera like that, and learning that little celebrity back and forthness instead of like little hustle and bustle gigs for little photography things. It was like real sitting and talking things. And after I left Los Angeles, literally I shut down shop. I was also working with Nick Cannon. We did a bunch of stuff for Incredible, which was his company, and he's also did movies and different things like that. He had a record label, and so I was always helping them out, and we had a partnership with them too as well. And I remember just like as soon as I left, I stopped everything that I was doing, and I said, "Hey, I'm just leaving. Sorry, guys. Sorry, everybody." And literally after I left, I would say all the Vine people, they went and started doing, those people you see now who got started off on Vine, they all started switching to a medium when Vine came out, which was Vine. And some of them, got really big, and they were like some of the forefronters of Vine. And it's funny to see it. It's funny to see it because you see like, wow, things just change and trickle down. So I agree with you. I guess what I'm trying to say is like what looks like an overnight success, a lot of times these people were not an overnight success. And I think people have this facade of this overnight success. Joe Rogan may look like an overnight success when most people don't know him, but really he started doing his podcasting around 2009. But before that, how many people actually knew who Joe Rogan was? And a lot of people will say, oh, Joe Rogan was killing it. He was a superstar before. Joe Rogan was not a superstar before. Sorry, guys, he wasn't. I was in Los Angeles. He wasn't a superstar. He wasn't. He wasn't an A-lister on the red carpet. He wasn't there. He wasn't that guy. Now he is that guy.
Wasn't he? Didn't he? He was an MMA fighter or something, though, wasn't he?
He was an MMA fighter. He was an actor for a little while. I mean, he did.
Try to be a stand-up.
He became a stand-up comedian. Then he did like the hosting thing. He did a bunch of things. And he did Fear Factor, and that gave him a little bit of money, of cushion, to where he can just kind of float around and just do what he kind of wants to do for fun. He wasn't a gazillionaire, but it was enough for him where he could probably get like a nice apartment and not have to worry about paying rent next year or 2 years or 4 years from now. He can just kind of chill and float and figure out what he wants to do. And so from the way it goes, it looks like he just started playing with the podcasting thing and had no idea, where it would go, and just was having fun.
Yeah.
And 10 years later,
that's important too, I think.
What happened?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the expression I think the classic expression is it takes a long time to become an overnight success, right? And then the other thing I think that you touched on is, I'm not sure if he was doing MMA or any of the other things he was chasing for fun, but you could tell that when he did the podcast, that was a joyful experience for him anyway, and I suppose that resonated with listeners in a way. I'm sure that whatever level of awareness people had of him from MMA or Fear Factor or stand-up, maybe made his starting point a little bit further than someone who didn't have that. But yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that helped his trajectory when he wanted to get certain celebrities on, but he didn't really start getting celebrities on, it looked like, until about a year, solid celebrities, until about a year or two after the podcast started going. And the really big ones looks like about 6 years later. Before that, it was just like, Tom Green. These guys weren't big guys during that time. Tom Green, come on, man.
Yeah.
These guys weren't like the big heavyweights. I mean, the people, heavy hitters who you would say, oh, guess who was on my show last night? Tom Green, no.
Yeah. I always liked Tom Green.
I mean, I could stand.
I know what you mean.
I didn't like Tom Green, but you get my point. It's just like these weren't the A-listers. These weren't the people who were going to make your film or your show, get a lot of viewers because you had him on. He didn't, from what I looked at, he didn't have those original hit bangers. A lot of these people were his friends he kept on doing on the first year or two. It looked like a lot of them were his buddies and a couple of comedians, but these weren't even like the big ones. There wasn't like Dave Chappelle's earlier on in his podcast. This didn't come until the previous recent years, maybe like 4 years ago. Before that, it was hit or miss. It looked like to me mostly B-listers or C-listers.
What do you think about, I mean, it's kind of quieted down now a bit, but like, what do you think about all the controversy around him?
Oh, about his, the Planet of the Apes things and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, he said a lot of controversial stuff that's gotten him in deep water, and Spotify is removing episodes now. And,
really?
Are they
removing episodes?
Yeah, they've silently, without making a major announcement about it, they've removed episodes. Apparently, there's, he's just said really inappropriate things that are obviously around COVID and. Whatever your beliefs are, is he a reliable source? Should he be the person talking about it, considering his level of influence and the size of audience and reach? Politically incorrect stuff, I think, gets a pass because, freedom of speech is important to protect.
Right.
I was just curious, like where, as a podcaster, where you stood on, his, for lack of a better word, maybe censorship.
It's touchy, man. It's touchy. And the reason why I say it's touchy is because I have my personal opinion of Joe Rogan, and I've listened to his podcast, and I saw the ones about the Planet of the Apes. I didn't resonate with me that he was like, oh man, this guy's like, oh, we got to get rid of this guy. That didn't hit me.
Yeah.
I just thought he was trying to explain a story that he felt resonated to him or the way that he was seeing it as, and whoever he also was associating with at the time. Sometimes we slip into word comas, based off of our surroundings, meaning sometimes we might hang out with people throughout our lives that may not be that good to be hanging around with when it comes to communicating with. And sometimes they start saying stuff that's inappropriate and you don't really think about it because you've heard people say stuff like that previously in your lifetime. And so sometimes what ends up happening is, you might not think it's a bad thing to say because you've heard them say it. And so now you start, birds of a feather flock together kind of a thing. And it's like, and now you may have grown and you might realize, oh, that's just some ignorant, shit to say. At the time, it sounded like, because I was hanging around these two group of guys, that it might have been okay. But what the hell is that? And you start talking when you're doing these podcasts, right? You just start talking off the dome. And you might mess up. You might say something totally off the rail that may have made no sense. I'm pretty sure everybody does. I'm pretty sure I have.
Yeah.
But I think that's the problem when you're doing something that's like a podcast. It's just so casual. It's just so free-spirited. It's just so honest sometimes that they're so long that they can just be mistakes. You can say dumb stuff, things that you might have never meant, but you're just like, what the fuck did I just say, bro? Whoa. Yeah. And I think after you had thousands of conversations, you go back and listen to one. I'm pretty sure you're going to find one where you're like, dude, what? Oh, bro. And anybody can clip it and edit it up. Yes. And anybody can clip it and edit it up. We know how to do that. We know how to get Final Cut and chop up stuff. You don't even need Final Cut. You can get, GarageBand for the audio, or you can get one of the little iMovies from for Apple, or just even just an app these days, and just clip things up and make it sound like how you want. You can change people's words. I mean, they got technology out where you can literally sound exactly like another person, and make a computer reference of that and push it out if you really want to do it. But overall, where he went at it is, I think he just started talking too much, and I think he just said something dumb. And I think he was at a different place. Yeah. And I don't think he meant it for malice or try to be, say something really ignorant. And the whole COVID thing, I think he's just trying to, help people. I think that he believes, that there's not just one way that the government is telling us to do things, and that we should be open-minded to, hearing all sides and not just listening to what the government is strictly saying. And I buy that. But do I believe everything he's saying? No. I mean, but do other people do that? Yeah. There's always a group or side who doesn't believe in, like, the type of treatments that you should take or the government doing these things like this. But everybody has their own beliefs. So that's a beautiful thing about freedom of speech. But I think it really matters for me to answer the question. When it comes to freedom of speech, I think it matters on who's saying it. I believe Joe Rogan is intelligent enough to articulate himself in a way to where he gets his point across, to where it's not, oh, go do this because I just did it. Now, if you want to do that after that point, that's up to you. I listen to Joe Rogan. I still got a freaking shot.
Yeah.
And I still agree with some of the stuff he says.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting too, by your logic, the way you kind of described it is like you're on a podcast, you talk for a long time. The longer you speak, the more chances are that you might misspeak or misquote or say something that you didn't really mean or didn't come out the way you intended. And, his podcast, I mean, I think sometimes they're like 2 or even 3 hours.
Yeah.
So they're like, that's easily double, triple, or quadruple the length of, most of the stuff that I'm listening to on a regular basis. So again, by your logic, he's quadrupled his risk, just sticking around.
The longer you start talking, man, the more you start talking, that's any individual. The more you just sit in a situation where you just start blabbering, you're bound to say something that's going to offend somebody or just going to be ignorant no matter what. I don't care who you are. And I think he mentioned it to himself personally. I think on a video or one of his podcasts, I think he actually just, referenced something similar to that. And I can resonate with it because it's like, you just start talking, man. And it's easy for somebody to pick apart what you said and say, oh man, did you hear what he said? Did you hear what she said?
Yeah.
I can find anything on anybody's podcast and highlight and say, did you hear what they said? And it can offend somebody.
Yeah. And take it out of context
easily.
I want to make sure I understand your concept of word comas because I really liked it. Can you just explain what that means to you?
Sure. Word coma. So word coma would be something like, you kind of just you get into this position where you're just like around certain people and, you just start emulating their energy or their opinions or the things that they kind of say just because you're around them. You might not believe it. You might not even try to, you might not even speak like that normally, but now you've associated with these people and you get in this word coma of where you're in this box where you just hear these things ricocheting over and over again. You hear these words, they might be bad, but they keep on saying it. And eventually it starts just dripping on you. And you have to look at guys like Rogan. He was on this podcast earlier during those times when they did a lot of those clips. And he was with like these 2 other guys that he kept on shooting with. And I don't know them. I'm not saying this, but I'm saying when you're around certain individuals, they get comfortable and they start saying certain words. And I'm not saying they did. And they might be more accepting of these type of jokes. And you might have heard them say this stuff. So you start getting around them and you just start spitting out some similar stuff too, because you heard, that resonates with them, even if it's wrong. Yeah. Because you might have heard them say
socially acceptable in that microcosm of society that you've injected.
That word coma, bro. That little box, that bubble.
The slang, it's like a slang bubble. You have people who use slang in a certain way, and then you hear them say it, and you're like, "What does that word mean?" Oh, okay, I kind of think that's cool. I might adopt that.
Right. Even if you, but I'm saying it to the point of even where and this is why I put the coma into it. Even when you know that it's bad, you just hear it, and it's just like you just still you stay and you ricochets within that little box and you start saying the same stuff and you're like, what the hell did I say later? Once you get out of it, once you get out of the coma, you're like, what the fuck did I just say? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Who did they record me? No, that was not me.
You reminded me for some reason, this popped into my head. Like when I first finished high school, I worked I took a year off kind of between high school and college. And I took a job in New York City. I was working in a clothing store called The Loft.
The Loft.
The Loft.
I remember that.
It's not around anymore, but it was super expensive, high-end clothing.
Was it for women?
That catered to, no, it was men. It was catered mostly to gay men. Oh. And myself and one other guy, we were the only 2 straight guys that worked in this store. All the other guys were super camp.
Sounds like my fashion merchandise class.
Your what class?
My fashion merchandise class in high school. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So I worked there, and I made friends with all these dudes, and we'd be hanging around the store and joking and stuff like that. And then one day something happened, and I made a comment and I said, "Oh man, that is so gay." And everyone like went like record scratch, you know, and then they were like, then they looked at me and they started cracking up. They're like, "You're right," you know. And I was like, "Oh my God, I said the thing," because they're all day long. They're like, "Oh, you're so gay. That's so gay. Why are you so gay?" You know, like doing their thing. And I was in the word coma and I picked it up and it came out of me, you know, without even like my censor button was off that day. But you know, luckily I'd used it in in an appropriate context that I became more accepted and celebrated for it. But for me personally, it was like, oh damn, what did I just say? Am I in trouble here? You know? So yeah, I get it.
No, totally. I mean, and that's exactly what I'm trying to say. That's my whole point. You got it. You grabbed it. You understand it. That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, you know, I have a best friend, you know, growing up as a kid, and, you know, he later said he was gay, but we already figured he was gay anyways. And, you know, throughout time, words change, right? You know, you might have been able to say some words a couple of years ago, and it might have not been a thing, right? But now that changes, so you have to keep up with the time. So even things that you might have been cool to say at that time may not be cool anymore, because now somebody was offended from that word years ago, and now they're like, you know what, that word's not cool to me anymore. And now you just said this word, and I'm going to go back and find a tape where you said this word, and now you're just like in the doghouse because of some stuff you said, you know, a couple of years ago that might have been cool during that time. You know, you've got people, you know, popping pills and stuff like that in the 70s, you know, and then, you know, some people get caught. But I'm very sure, you know, working in the entertainment industry, that there's a lot of people popping pills.
Still, yeah. But
yes.
More careful.
Yes. Yeah. Still. And, you know, and it's a thing. But, you know, we isolate individuals when it's time to demonize and focus only on a small group of people. But really, from what I gathered from working in the entertainment industry with a lot of people and what I've seen and stuff like that, not directly the people that I'm talking about and I brought up on the show, but I've seen it for sure. You know, people try to come up to you with that stuff, being a dude. Yeah. So the whole, I can't believe such and such, or this person's doing this. I'm like, wait a minute. Have you guys worked in the entertainment industry? Like, where you guys been under? Like, come here, come to LA, come to this Hollywood stuff. You will see people doing this all day, and everybody knows it. So it's like, it's weird. But I would like to say, to stick more in the conversation of the, word coma, is you mentioned a couple minutes ago, that's exactly my whole point of everything, is like, that's what ends up happening. You start saying stuff because you heard it from some other people you were hanging around with. And you might not ever mean to say those type of things, but just who you associate with starts rubbing off on you in an indirect way or subconsciously. And like you said, you were just sitting there and you're like, oh man, that was so, holy shit. You caught yourself because you were like, what? But now everybody's, obviously these guys were all cool, but in the wrong group, they would have been like, oh man, I can't believe you. Can't believe you said that. We're going to get you fired. Like, no.
Yeah.
It could have been a bad thing, and you would have been judged. Yeah. And the thing was, that really wasn't who you were.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? That really wasn't who you were.
Yeah.
And so I like to say the same thing. From what I gather from reading from Joe Rogan, he seems to be a very versatile human person. He seems to like people. I don't see him as this racist guy. I don't see all these things. I just see him that he might have just got around the wrong person or remember something from his childhood or some other friends that were on the podcast. Maybe they said a couple of jokes similar like that, and maybe that resonated with them. And so he just felt comfortable because he heard it. And sometimes you just start you blabber it out. And again, I'm not saying that his co-host or anybody else said any things like that. I'm just saying I'm trying to give examples of context of how this happens, how people get in word comas. And I know it sounds like kind of funny, sounds kind of cliche, it's like a joke, but it's just reality. You are the average of the 5 most people you hang out with the most. And you will be amazed of how much silly stuff or things you might say or you might never have said will reflect based off of who you've been around with recently.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's interesting. Do you ever do like a friend edit?
Of course. I think, or they do it, or they do it automatically to themselves. But yes, I do.
Self edit. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think about that. Hey, so I know we talked about Rogan, quadrupling his risk for ending up in a word coma or saying something inappropriate by doing long podcasts. I'm gonna have to jump off because we've been talking about an hour.
Did we get past an hour? Oh man, that's when the conversation got real. Is once we passed our actual hour and we beat our time. So that's amazing.
Fast.
Yeah. So we really didn't get into your book and some other things like that. We can definitely jump back on another time and dig more into that stuff. And
Sure.
talk more about that because I'm pretty sure there's obviously a lot of stuff that you can talk about. You're a pretty versatile person, like you said, so makes sense. So Aaron,
cool, man.
thank you for coming on the show. Any last words on where people can get your book or any things you want to call out? Say it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So the two things I would say is if you want to connect with me or figure out, hear more about what I'm working on, my website is eranthomson.com. That's ERAN Thomson without a P, dry Thompson. So eranthomson.com. And also, we didn't talk about it, but I invented a music game called Song Saga. It's a party game, kind of like Cards Against Humanity, but you play it with a music app. It's all about kind of surfacing the memories and moments that matter to us and gets people sharing the stories and soundtrack of their lives. So if you want to check that out, go to song-saga.com. And if you want, we can give away a copy to one of your listeners. We've got a page on our website. It's song-saga.com/podcast. And if you go to that page and you just put in kids in the room, you could enter a draw to win a free game and we'll send one out to you. So yeah, that's my two plugs. Thanks for having me on.
No, that's amazing. So just send me all the links after we get off, and when we upload and push it out, we'll make sure we attach that. It was a great conversation, and I think you're gonna be doing good. Song Saga, that's awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right.
Brought to you by Moo Faces TV. Let's go.